Welcome to another episode of Miami Cop Talk. Visit us at MiamiCopTalk.com. With us is Robert Asensio and Raul Correa discussing the latest issues in public safety, law enforcement, what's in the news with invited guests. And again, visit us, help us grow our audience. We are one community, one voice. And let's get ready to start another episode of Miami Cop Talk. Another episode. We're one community, one voice. I'm Raul. With me is my partner, Robert Asensio. And we want to go ahead and thank our local sponsors and partners, Miami Tactical, New Era Alliances, Mainland Marlins, and Share Your Heart, who have all contributed to helping this new adventure of Miami Cop Talk take off the ground. You want to say hi to the folks, Robert?
Absolutely. I'm also excited today. Hi, everyone. I'm excited again with the guests that we have. We will be discussing a topic that's near and dear to my heart as a former legislator, as a police officer who encountered people with disabilities and always looking for a better way to serve them as members of the community. Raul, I think this guest is going to really blow people's socks off, if we could say that. Because it's really a topic that many people don't consider, but yet it's so critically important to people and productive citizens in our community. So let's get right into it. What do you say?
Absolutely. Let me introduce our guest. She's an amazing person, an amazing woman, an amazing mom, an amazing wife. She's a very funny individual. She actually has a great story to tell. She started a program. I want to introduce Michelle Rubin. She is the founder of Autism After 21. Welcome, Michelle, and say hi to the folks.
Hi, thank you, Raul. Thank you, Robert, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Michelle, I've known you for a while, and I know you have an amazing story. Our listeners will benefit from what you have to say, from telling your story. And basically, that's a lot of what we do here on Miami Cop Talk. We tell our stories, we share anecdotes and things that are going on in our community. As you will know, it is April, Autism Awareness Month. And quite surprisingly, a lot of people just think that autism is about a colorful puzzle and some kind of community involvement and this and the other. But it's a lot more than just a puzzled community. It is something deeper than that. And can you share your story and let us know how Autism After 21 came off to what it is today?
Sure, thank you. I am a mom, lived in South Florida for 50 years now. I have 3 sons, and my oldest son, Scott, is on the autism spectrum. When he was diagnosed in the mid-90s, early 90s, you never heard about autism yet. We were told by a team of experts just to take him home and do the best you can. There were no school programs in schools for young people or kids with autism back then. So we were really on our own. So this was our first child. So just kind of imagine what that's like. You go from the euphoria of being a new mom and having this wonderful child to when you start to realize that something's not right. So we went through some really difficult years. And then finally, when Scott was 5 or 6 years old, sadly, that rise in cases of autism started to get on everybody's radar screen. And the Palm Beach school system opened a classroom for him in Boca Raton, where I am. It was him and one other student. And it stayed that way for a whole year. There was no other kids coming in. And time went by, of course. Scott got older, and what communities are experiencing now is almost the same thing I went through when he was young, where there wasn't a lot of resources, there wasn't programs, communities didn't know what to do with him, people didn't understand what it was. It could be difficult being out in public with him at times. We were at the receiving end of a lot of misunderstandings from other parents and other children. I have 2 other sons younger than him who are typical kids. They're all in their 20s now. So as he got older and approached that, I'm going to be leaving high school, I can honestly say I found that year probably more stressful than the year he was diagnosed with the autism. We were losing our structure. He was going to be out of the school system. And with his intellectual disability, he was not going to college. He wasn't going to community college. He wasn't going to VOTEC school. So what was I going to do? It was either try and figure out if he can enter the community and work, or he was going to be sitting at home doing nothing. My personality is such that I was going to figure this out no matter what. So my friends and family, at their urging, was like, really, you should do something, start a program, let's work on this. And Autism After 21 was born as a nonprofit a decade ago. So once we started really looking around, and I thought to myself, what would I really have wanted for Scott that he did not learn in high school, but that he needs now to survive as an adult? And our programs were born out of that. Our premier program is called SOAR. It's a summer residential program that we base on college campuses around the state of Florida now. We started with our one location here. And those students come, they live in a dorm, and they get exposed to all those pre-employment skills, career exploration, self-advocacy skills, how to live independently. Most of our students come never having been away from home before. So we kind of equate it as kind of like landing on Mars. They're nervous, their parents are nervous. And within 48 hours, the students are like different people. They're making decisions on their own. They're starting to gel as a group. They find a friend, someone with a common interest. So it really changes their outlook on life and starts to kind of crack open that door about, and especially in their parents' minds, like, oh, maybe there really is something, that I can do that's going to be fulfilling and intersect with my interests and my abilities, where I can be a productive adult.
Well, Michelle, if I can jump in here for a second, because you just hit on a lot that for those people that are dealing with autism, or child or family member, or even a relative or friend that is on the spectrum, they're dealing with a lot. They may be able to sympathize and understand basically better what you're saying. But for those that don't understand, tell us about the project that you embarked on, educating the police and
Yes.
those people that would come to interact with Scott, because I think that's key to helping him succeed as a sustaining as much as can be.
Yes,
Adult.
we teach our students is about their community and where they live. A lot of these young adults are pretty sheltered and home, and they're not out moving around independently like, say, a typical young adult would be. So we started teaching Scott at 18 and 19 years old how to navigate the community by himself. So that meant riding a bike, even within a short distance from where we live. That led to training on locking up your bike and getting on the public bus and going a short distance, to maybe a couple of bus stops. We were able to get him a job through connections and visiting businesses in our area where it was going to be a skill that he could do. So he's been working at that job now for 9 years, and now even has a second job.
Wow.
So once you're out in the community, it's a giant leap of faith. I will admit that the first time I let Scott leave home by himself, he was 19 years old. He got on a bike, rode about 1.5 miles from our house, locked up that bike, and got on a bus on Military Trail. I swore I was not going to follow him in the car, but I was so nervous about him leaving. I sat at home for several hours and just watched like the Find My iPhone little green dot move around to make sure he was where he was supposed to be. Many other parents that I had interacted with over the years that had kids on the spectrum thought I was absolutely insane. Like, why are you letting him go by himself? I said, well, he has a job now. He needs this independence. I just knew it was the right way to go. So fast forward a couple of years, and there was an incident on the bus that led me to get involved with our local law enforcement. There was a fight, an altercation on the bus, not involving Scott, but 2 other passengers. So this led to the bus pulling over alongside the road, stopping and making everybody get off, and the police came to interview the other passengers. So that included my autistic son, Scott. So I get a phone call, I see my phone ring, it says Scott, I answer, and the person says, this is the Boca Raton Police Department. There was an incident on the bus. Well, the first thing, you're like, age like a decade, when you hear that. And then they were like, no, we're trying to interview your son, but now we have figured out that, he has a disability. And, you know, maybe you need to come to the scene. Can you come to where we are? And I was, absolutely. I jumped in my car and probably broke the law and was speeding on my way there. but,
Yeah.
but arrived at this scene that was only about 1.5 miles from my house. So when we got there, you know, this was something Scott had never experienced before. He had had no interaction with law enforcement before. So he was quite nervous and not responding to their questions and covering his ears and just trying to like calm himself, I think, but wanted to get out of that situation as quickly as he could. So as I got out of my car and I walked up to this and I was watching him, it just dawned on me that had this been an incident that involved Scott, that something, you know, maybe bad because of misunderstandings about why he wasn't reacting to the law enforcement's questions, that maybe this could be a bad situation. So after that day, I called our police department here in Boca and said, I need to speak, you know, to the community resource officer. Had a phone conversation. The next day, 2 officers in one of the police cars came to my house to meet Scott and let him see them up close and see their car and see what they wear, and just try to get him more comfortable with who they were and why they were there. So we had a nice conversation in front of the house, and Scott, you know, got a little more relaxed. Obviously, it was a different situation that he had found himself in a couple days earlier.
Was that the Boca Raton Police Department?
Yes.
Kudos to them for sending someone out. Actually, 2
Yes.
people, right?
Wow.
Kudos. Wow,
Absolutely.
bravo.
Absolutely.
You know, plus to me, I happen to be friends with the mayor also, so
I'm sure that helps.
I called them also, but that was an after call. The police were responsive right away. They were like, oh, we knew all about the incident that happened, you know, with the bus yesterday. And I was explaining to this community resource officer about Scott and his level of disability. Because even though I said he's 20, you know, his intellectual disability, he's 10. I said, you know, like you can't expect that he's going to respond like a typical 20-something. So following that day, we took it one step further, and I went to a Boca Police Department morning meeting with a picture of Scott while he was at work and introduced myself, told them who Scott was and where he worked, like where he passes through in our community, what bus stops he's at, that he's at the Tri-Rail station, you know, taking a shuttle to work after he gets off the bus there. And I said to them, I said, you know, there's a lot of Scots out in our community that use the bus or they're on the connections, the door-to-door service that you don't know about, that, you know, God forbid that there's ever a public incident, you need to be aware of what possibly their reaction could be. And then Raul knows about this card system that we use where we encourage students to get an ID card that they show law enforcement when they're asked for identification. Most of these young adults don't drive. So when you produce your state ID, there's a little blue card you can get, and it says right on there, I have autism, like Scott says, an intellectual disability. I most likely won't respond to commands. I'll cover my ears, and I won't do what you tell me to do.
Michelle, let me jump in here. I appreciate your story, and I want to say, considering everything that goes on in the news on a daily basis, and we here on Miami Cop Talk, if you're listening, MiamiCopTalk.com, we're talking to Michelle Rubin from Autism After 21. We here at Miami Cop Talk are advocates for law enforcement. We point out the good, the bad, the ugly, but we do support our police on this show, obviously. Based on my background, Robert Asensio's background. But you mentioned how Boca PD came out to your home, and community engagement on both sides, you know, community engaging with law enforcement engaging with the community is so important. I believe your program is housed out of FAU, and FAU has a campus police.
Yes.
How have they been involved in your program?
Yeah, so after that incident and after my introduction with Boca Police, I invited the FAU Police Department, and they are a full-on police department for their campus of about 25,000 students here in Boca to come into the classroom while my students are living there and talk to them about what's a safe way to engage with law enforcement. Some of the students do drive, and I know just as a regular citizen, you know, when you see those police lights behind your car, no matter how long you've been driving, it does make you nervous.
It does.
Yeah, oh my God, what did I do?
Yeah.
So think about it for someone with autism who really lives, in a much more black and white world maybe than we do, or possibly does. How easily a misunderstanding can occur. So we
Correct.
have the FAU Police Department come in. They introduce themselves to our students, talk about what they wear, talk about the police dogs that are on campus. They have bicycle police on campus, what the different uniforms look like. And then they go into different scenarios about what you should do if you are engaged with law enforcement. Like if they ask for your ID, we talk about these additional cards you can have that identify yourself as having a disability or being on the autism spectrum. Do you carry an ID? Even if you don't drive, do you have a state issued ID? And if you don't, you should get one. Don't put your hands in your pockets. If you're in a car, don't reach in the glove box. Don't, if you're comfortable telling the officer right from the beginning that you have a disability, that'll change the trajectory of the conversation right away. A lot of behaviors with autism can be mistaken for other things. That you're, using alcohol, that you've taken drugs, that you have a medical issue, that all kinds of things that can be misunderstood, especially from what Raul said in the beginning. A lot of people, even as much as autism has grown in advocacy and knowledge in the community, there's still a lot of people that don't have firsthand experience with somebody on the spectrum.
Yeah, I'd like to point something out. Do you guys remember Mactown in North Miami? The officer involved shooting of the caregiver, but
Yeah.
it was because the autistic child or young adult, right? I think he's an adult. I know he's an adult, but wasn't adult at the
Yeah, from a
time.
group home facility. Yes.
Correct.
That exposed need for added training in law enforcement and awareness, where the officer was not, he thought the young man, autistic, was a threat to him, and he discharged his firearm.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the caregiver was hit, but fortunately, no one was killed.
Yes.
I think, Michelle, you're just training, and that's where I'd like to go with this conversation. What's remaining of the conversation? We have about 14 minutes. But what I really would like to get your thoughts on is the reception that the law enforcement community has provided you throughout the state, the reception the state legislature, because I know that you're partially funded by the state, and what can we do to enhance this great autism after 21 and similar programs, because like you said, there are more Scots out there.
Yes, there are. The response from police departments that I've interacted with and from these university police departments has been wonderful. They want to know these students are on their campus so that a misunderstanding doesn't occur. There are more training programs for law enforcement now than there's ever been. Lots of departments have engaged in training about autism. But for example, the FAU Police Department, when I first went to them some years ago, they received maybe an hour or two of training. Throughout, these are officers that have been there for years about students or young adults with disabilities. So even amongst the student population at FAU, that disabled population, and autism can be, a hidden disability. If you saw my son walking down the street, you would not know that he's autistic until you started to talk to him, that something is wrong. Walks fine, no physical issues, looks like a typical young guy going down the street. So that's how these misunderstandings start. But once you engage with somebody, you have to recognize what the situation is. So by giving law enforcement the tools that they need to do that, it obviously makes a big difference. So the incident that you mentioned in Miami Beach with the caretaker, that those kind of things don't happen again, because their behavior can be very erratic. And I think a lot of people mistake those behaviors possibly for somebody that's using drugs or has been drinking, or that they're, not in their right mind, which is not the case.
Raul, you're a trainer. What's been your experience with the law enforcement community, the autism community, certainly in the schools, but more, broader around the county, Miami-Dade County?
Well, I appreciate what Michelle's doing, and before we end, I don't want to have her give all her information, because there are a lot of folks out there that want to learn. Our parents are desperate for more information, where they can find programs, where they can find resources to help them deal with their family member. that may be on the spectrum. But I can tell you from a law enforcement perspective, I think there's been mixed signals there. I know it becomes a very trendy thing. You see a lot of the police cars out there, striped up and whatever, and it's beautiful. And that's a great thing how, law enforcement is embracing, um, you know, the diversity that we have in our community. I know for a long period of time, it is all about SWAT and being the tough guy or the tough gal and this and the other. But the fact is, that is such a minute aspect of law enforcement. And I think as we see what's going on in our nation with the growth and development of what law enforcement is as a profession, I think that we're starting to realize that community engagement is probably the largest aspect of what every police department should really be investing their time and efforts in. And if they invested their time and efforts in training their officers to be more community involved individuals, the likelihood is that the bad and the last resort of law enforcement would be a lot less out there in our community. Michelle, I've met Scott briefly online. He seems amazing. He's awesome. And like you said, he's working 2 jobs. He's now working 2 jobs. I'm retired. I'm barely working this job, So congratulations on that. You've done a great job. Share with us information that people may need to know or may want to know if they're seeking help with their family member or their own circumstances, because believe it or not, and I'm going to say it to the listeners, believe it or not, we have people that may listen to this program, Miami Cop Talk, who may be on the spectrum and may say, you know what, let me reach out. I need information. It's a big gamut of folks that we deal with when we say on the spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. I encourage your listeners, if they are interested in what we do or want to contact me directly, visit our website, autismafter21.org. My contact information is on there. Parents as your young adult gets older, they're in high school. I know as a parent, I always felt that day would never come, that he was going to be out in the big world, that you're so engrossed in their day-to-day lives. And every year is a roller coaster of changes and you never know what's going to go on. My son, for example, didn't speak till he was 14 years old. So this was challenging for us, difficult behaviors. Being out in public could be difficult. But we had 2 other kids. So we pressed on with just trying to live like every other family did. Learning about your community and the resources that are out there is something that really didn't dawn on me until Scott got older and we started experiencing, problems and what happens when I'm not there to help him and who's going to step in. So having a support network in your community is important. When Scott moves around Boca Raton now and sees a police officer, a lot of them, hi, Scott, how's work today? They're at the Tri-Rail station. They're at the mall. They're, our community police are all over the town. It gives me peace of mind as a parent, knowing that there is more information out there to them, that they know who Scott is, that he's out in our community, that would prevent, a scary misunderstanding from happening. So parents, be proactive. It's important that you start giving your student this independence as they get older. We were told that Scott would never be able to function at this level. He's doing amazing things. Opening that door and giving them a chance, not only changes their life, but as a parent, it changes your life in ways that I never imagined in the last 10 years for us and for my other children as well.
Michelle,
So the question I would ask is a follow-up question. I think our listeners, certainly our police officer community and those stakeholders would like to know the reception you've had from the law enforcement community. How has that been? And as well as the legislature.
The law enforcement community wants to learn. They want to know about these students and young adults that are out in their communities. The reception's been good. I've never called a police department or a law enforcement officer that didn't engage, want to know more, come to meet me, come to meet my students. And everybody walks away having learned something. our students, when the police departments come into our classrooms during the summer, the presentations may be 20 minutes and the questions go on for an hour. They want to know, they want to learn. They all watch media and see things on YouTube and on TV and on Instagram, and you know what's real and what's not real, or what they are interested in knowing. So when you have a couple of real police officers right in front of you, it's a resource that most of them have never, been engaged with before. And we try to really tell our students they are a resource for you. And your family. Like, I have incredible peace of mind with Scott out on his own in our community, knowing that they know him. We've had incidents, people have stolen his debit card. He's the nicest guy and can be easily taken advantage of, let's put it that way. And the leap of faith that my husband and I took to let him have this level of independence, it was important to him. He wanted it. And we decided we couldn't keep him from doing it if he wanted a life. And I think my faith let me know that when I'm not there, somebody else is going to step in and help him. And the community has really responded, including law enforcement. And you mentioned, Robert, the legislature. I, of course, have spoken to them many times. I'm in the middle of speaking to one of our state legislators again about something new that I'm developing up in the Tallahassee community. And they're responsive. Something is going on now that I experienced when Scott was 2 years old, where we went from not a lot of people with autism in our communities, not a lot of services. And then all these young kids started getting diagnosed with autism, and it completely changed the perspective of our school system and our parents and our attitude about people we see out in public. Well, all of those students are now adults and becoming adults. And those adult numbers will increase for at least another decade, if not longer, of students that are graduating from school systems around not only the state of Florida, but the country. So communities are now responding in a like way that we did when kids were 3 and 4 years old with autism, that now communities have to accept and invite in these adults with autism. So families and parents like me are out there advocating, making change, and we're asking community partners like law enforcement, to step up, and like the state legislator, and work with us, and they are. They know that this is a growing need that communities will have to work with. And the way I, try to describe it to them is, think of having, tens of thousands of adults that your community needs to support and take care of, or think of having tens of thousands of adults that can support themselves and live successfully in the community. Which way do you want to go?
Certainly.
Correct.
So, Raul, before you close it out, I just wanted to point out to everyone listening and watching, visit us at miamicoptalk.com, our website. Our podcasts are there, our videos are there. This important conversation will be also hosted there on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube, social media, podcast, help us grow. Michelle will ask you to distribute this video as well. I mean, this podcast as we can, because I ask you this. My last question for you is this. How can we, the community, help this incredible, underserved community?
Yeah, that people with disabilities are one of the last populations in the country that still receive a fair amount of discrimination, in spite of laws on our books, to help protect all of our citizens. If you have a disability, especially a hidden disability like autism can be, it can be extremely difficult to be successful in the community and to enter the workforce. We are asking for community partners like yourselves, like our legislators, our law enforcement, businesses. Open your doors. Don't be afraid. Keep an open mind. There are resources like me available to help you and educate you. The school system has done a good job of going down that road, but now we need to take it a step further for when you leave the school system. And communities can respond by getting involved. So when I come to your business and say, would you be interested in helping out and doing an on-the-job training program with us, say yes, because we will offer the support you need to make it work. And not only will you change that student's life, you will change your own life and the lives of your employees in ways that you cannot even imagine. The people that Scott works with, they say when he walks in the door and they're having a bad day, that it completely changes their outlook on life. And there is no way that they're not going to step it up and work as hard as he does and be happy about doing it.
Outstanding. Thank you
That's
so much.
amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
Michelle,
thank you both for what you're doing.
Michelle, thank you very much for spending time with us. I was on my best behavior, if you've noticed.
I love it.
Yeah. So
You even
thank you.
dressed up for Michelle. You
Yeah,
even
I
dressed
got
up for her.
Yeah, I got a jacket on. But thank you, Michelle, for being on. Really appreciate it. I think this has been enlightening. It's been enlightening to me. I think it'll be enlightening for our listeners. Again, if you have any questions, if you want to reach out to Michelle Rubin, that's autismafter21.org. Tons of resources on that website. Her information's on there. Reach out to her, autismafter21.org. And again, I want to thank Michelle Rubin for being on. Michelle, any last words before we sign off?
No, I'm just going to say that the journey that I've witnessed in my own life over the last 29 years, my husband actually came up with the line when we get calls a lot to speak to parents that have a young child that's just been diagnosed with autism. And our attitude has become, it's not as bad as you think. And it's not. We've had a great life with our family, our other children, and most importantly, Scott has a great life. So it's been a great journey for us.
Beautiful. Those are great parting words. Thank you again, Michelle Rubin from Autism After 21. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you to our sponsors. This is Miami Cop Talk. We're signing off. Visit us at miamicoptalk.com. Thank you for listening. Spread the word. Share this podcast. Again, we want to thank our listeners, our sponsors, and Michelle Rubin from autismafter21.org for being with us today.
Thanks, guys.